Good morning. Welcome, everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm in a different location again. I have the honor of dog sitting for a few people. So I'm sitting on their screened-in porch. It's a beautiful morning. And this morning, just kind of thinking about, what would be interesting, most interesting of benefit for listeners. um, the concept of community kind of came in, and I thought it might be something fun to explore for us this morning. Um, I think a lot of us have felt this shift in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. Everything is kind of moving. I shouldn't say everything, but there's a general sense of people coming together, working together, community, bonding, doing things together, not in isolation, ironically, because we came out of a time of isolation. And I love that, building community is a core value of mine. I also think it's important to kind of look at our own wounds around community, because if we don't really look at those and address those, we're bringing that into the community we're trying to create. And the wounds, as we know, are where the gift is. So I don't know. I just thought we could kind of open with that today, see where this takes us, um, talk about different kinds of communities, the way we show up in community, and this concept that can be a little difficult to understand, that we are an individual having our own individual experiences, but as you and I subscribe to, the way we see the world is that we're all connected, we're all one. So what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm responsible for someone else's potentially harmful choices? Does that mean that I'm feeling everything that everyone else is feeling? So I think that can be a little confusing, and maybe we can try to shed some light on that today. But I just wanted to kind of ask you, when you think about community, what are you looking for in community? What are you wanting to bring to a community? Anything that you'd like to share, but I just thought a question might kick us off.
Okay. Thanks, Blair. I am in my same location. Uh,
Which is
funny,
gorgeous and amazing.
before we got started, I was talking about this energy that feels around me of like being kind of stuck a little bit, like anchored, keeping me a little bit from engaging more fully in community, just because of some obligations that I have assumed as a mother. So it's funny, Claire and I have similar life experiences, like again, from the other side of the coin, though, because you're moving from place to place to place, literally, each week, and I'm on the same couch. So, community. Personally, as an introvert, but the kind that everybody thinks you're an extrovert, I um, crave community and connection, but also really need to recharge in solitude. Communities. You said a couple things, so let me make sure I organize my brain a little bit. First of all, I like to break down words. It's very interesting to me how language kind of spells it all out, pun intended. So the prefix com means to join or together, or with. I'm pretty sure. And then unity. So that word means with unity, together with unity. So right there, that is the idea of what you're talking about. How are we all one, right? This idea that we're one, but we're having our own experience. So the word community, just beautiful. It's clear as a bell. Another thing you said about addressing our wounds in relation to community experiences, and not to bring our wounds, to a new community. But I had this sort of other thought about that. In community, we're able to heal. these wounds? And do I feel safe in the communities that I find myself in, or the communities that I've created to share some of these wounds, right? So there's a little bit of yes, you don't want to unconsciously enter in and dump your junk all over a new, creation. But how do we bring our wounds? And because we heal together, right? That's just kind of the way it goes. So that was one thought I had. Another thing, I know you're having the experience of all these kind of communities. You've joined, started your writers group. And I have noticed in some people in my life, the after effects of this isolation is continued isolation, and actually not feeling safe out in the world. And so I think there's a couple different dynamics going on. You have the people that are so hungry for connection and just dying to get out there and connect and form these groups, meaningful, powerful groups, right? Change makers, like change maker energy groups and rebuilding. And then you have the people that are deeply wounded from everything we've come out of, that are hiding in their rooms, basically under the covers, afraid. And so I just want to acknowledge that too, for whoever's listening, whoever our community is that we're building. There's room for both, right? There's room for both. So my experience with community, I would say, I would say I had a hard time, kind of riding the wave of community. I felt like I was a change maker in my family. I mean, I'll start with that first community. I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, so there were 9 of us under one roof. That was my first community, and I was the one always saying, "Well, I don't know about that. I don't think I agree with that." Or, excuse me. So I'm not good at pretending. I'm going to speak what I think. And so oftentimes that looks like a contrarian, right? Or a rebel, or, oh, why she got to ruffle everything. So I'm not sure that I've had an easy time in community. And I've definitely been wounded in communities. So I am very selective now about if I'm invited. So, the old me would have been like, yay, I'm invited. They want me. Yay. Please like me. And now it's like, okay, I can be invited, but I can also discern, is this a safe environment for me? What is this community about? Do I want to be a part of what they represent? Do they even know what they're about? Or are they just people randomly gathering because they all live on the same street? And so that's just a lot of thoughts. Very focused question from you. Popcorn thoughts from me. You take it from.
I love it. Thanks for, and when you said, what did you call yourself? A change maker?
I think so.
So that brings me to this idea that when we know ourselves in an intimate way, we understand our gifts, we understand what we bring to a group dynamic, which is going to look a little bit different, in every group. But if you can kind of latch on to an archetype, maybe we'll say,
yeah,
and yours is change maker, right? That can be really challenging in a community. If a community is not ready for change or disruption of the normal order, I can understand how that could sometimes feel lonely.
totally.
But we need you so bad.
Well, thank you. I see things differently, right? So I guess at the time that we're in right now, where it feels like the dust and the rubble has settled a little bit, and are we going to recreate that which we have come from, or are we going to bring fresh eyes and open hearts, right? To
Yeah.
creating something new. And you asked about the idea of, I'm just going to say, the one, the how are we all one? So I think about it like this: if you were, say, the Great Spirit, right, hovering over the earth, we would just be known as the human. The human is having trouble opening their hearts. The human is, we are, individuated rays or energetic signatures, right? But we are a collective. And so as my energy integrates and emanates cohesion or cohesively, that energy affects the organism that is the human. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see it sometimes as like cells of our body, right? And if you and I see the universe in a holographic way, right? Whereas what we see is replicated in both a smaller form and a grander form, that we are similar, like cells in our body. Some are differentiated, some have very specific jobs, some don't have a job until they are given a job. Then we've got you've got single-celled organisms like maybe parasites, you've got multi-celled organisms that live within our body. Then we've got the organs, which are a bunch of cells functioning together, So all of that makes up my body. So it makes sense to me that each one of us are like cells on a greater body of Gaia, or however you see that greater the presence beyond here on our planet.
Yeah, I love that, Claire. I mean, I've never really heard it explained like that or described like that, but I really love that. So, you have the body that is the human, right? And then, yeah, that's a really great way of looking at it.
And there's that passage in the Bible, and I'm going to totally butcher this, but something about how like you're an arm, I'm a leg, like we don't cut off parts of the body just because they're not functioning the way we think they should, or they're not optimally healthy, right? We as a unit come together and say, okay, how are we as the body going to address this wonky arm or whatever?
Right,
and that goes back to the wound that you're talking about. And for me, I think the archetype that I bring to community would be something along the lines of container creator. And that's why I love these systems like, you and I love Gene Keys, human design. Other people tap into like Ayurveda. Other people love the Enneagram and the Strengths Finder. All of these systems, in my opinion, provide us with knowledge of ourselves so that we can show up in our most authentic way, right? So my life's work in the Gene Keys is to bring structure. And that means that I'm able to create community pretty quickly and pretty effortlessly. And so then my challenge, of course, is the limitation. That's the shadow of limitation that comes in, and that's a whole thing. But I think about one of my first woundings in community was in high school. I was balls deep in evangelical Christianity, right? I swallowed it whole. And my whole community at that time was youth group. So all my best friends were in youth group, and we did everything together, like summer camps. My very best friend and I led youth group worship band. She played guitar. We both sang together. And then we had some other friends who would come in with different instruments. That was my community. And, as a teenager, your friends are your entire world. At least mine were, my whole world. And around 16, I started kind of experimenting and like going to some parties and doing some drinking and, you know, stepping into my quote unquote rebellious phase that I had not tasted at all up until that point. And my youth leader at the time basically pulled my friend and I aside and said, "Hey, we've heard these things about you. People, you know, the good old, oh, we're concerned about you," which like triggers the fuck out of me still to this day. And basically like, you can't lead the youth group worship band anymore. And, you know, now that I'm an adult, I understand what he was trying to do. It wasn't done with loving care, I'll tell you that. It was done with the dominance of trying to control the group, which is what I think we see a lot of times in community, is like, this community is going to look this specific way. And so then, you know, the natural leader kind of shakes out and that person will step up and dominate the other people, right? I understand what he was trying to do. But that was one of my first core wounds in community. I'm not fill in the blank enough to be loved and to be accepted in this group. And so I'm out. And I've carried that. I've really carried that. And, you know, I've done my own work around it, but it comes to a point now where I know one of my jobs in, you know, what we're creating with retreats and what we're creating with the writers group is to protect the container. I've gotten that message, and I don't love the word protect. You know, we've talked about that too. There's nothing to be protected from, but it means to kind of protect the integrity of the container and the group. And I'm still trying to figure out what that means.
Okay, can I speak to that for a second?
Yes, please.
Well, sorry, that sucks. So just, I mean, you know, we connect, but as a human, I want to reflect back. Claire, I'm really sorry. That sucks. So without, I remember when we were starting something, I don't remember if we were doing guided meditations on Zoom. I don't really remember, but it was during, you know what?
The lockdown.
And I didn't, interesting. I never felt as if I could fully engage in the experience because I felt like I was like a sentry. And I said that to you, like, I feel like I am, and I've never thought about the container. You're always talking about container. And I'm always like, fuck the container. I want to be a rebel. I want to be free. I want to just do whatever. And you're like, well, you're going to need to have a container. And I've always pushed up against that because I'm like, nobody puts baby in a corner. Like, no. But now that you're saying that, that was my role in that thing we started online. And it is actually a really heavy responsibility. And I wonder if that impacts your ability to fully enter in and receive from blessings and gifts of the community.
Interesting you brought in the word receive. Yeah, that like really stands out to me. I'll have to sit with that because when I am the one, and it's not always, but I would say majority of the time, I'm the one making the plans. I'm getting the group together. I'm sending the group text. I'm hosting the events, right? It is challenging. And I'll bring in another Bible story, which is so interesting that this is coming in second time. But like the story in the Bible of Mary and Martha, do you know that story?
I'm afraid I do not.
I love it so much. So I'll just summarize it. Jesus comes to visit these sisters, Mary and Martha, and I'm pretty sure they were like patrons of him. Like they would kind of help pay his way and like take care of him and whatever.
Okay.
But like Martha is Miss Busybody. She's the one who's hosting all. I'm guessing she's the oldest of the family. I'll just say that.
Okay.
So because I am also the oldest, she's cooking, she's cleaning, she's running all over the house, and she's like, she looks over and Mary is chilling at the feet of Jesus, just like, you know, doe-eyed and devotion. And Martha's like, bitch, get up, move your ass. There's all this shit that has to be done. And Mary's like, you're Jesus is basically then like, you're missing it. She's exactly where she's supposed to be.
Right.
And not that Martha's bad or she's doing something wrong, but she's not in receiving mode.
Right.
And there's a gift in giving community. Absolutely. I receive from that. But yeah, I think I'm going to need to just sit with that. Like, what would it look like for me to completely step out of that role in specific situations? And that brings up the question too of like leadership. You know, there's all different types of leadership.
Yeah.
And as we're kind of like building this new world, what leadership has to change. And I think leadership used to take on this really and I'm going to say toxic masculine, because it's not masculine in its divine incarnation is beautiful.
Can we
right?
say just energy of dominance?
Yeah, but I really am drawing it to like my masculine side. It is my masculine that gets out of balance, that wants to control a situation. And yeah, when we say masculine, we don't mean men and women. We mean the energy that exists within all of us. So bringing in maybe a more feminine approach of less structure, or just redefining what does leadership mean? What does leadership look like? And there's all different types of leaders. So I don't know. Do you have a sense of like?
So what I'll just, again, we're just bringing up stories, right? I was in this book club, and it was very clear that there was a leader. You know, she was the person who had organized it. And so, I mean, she was the leader. And when you would say something like, well, as you know, I know you're the leader of this group, would it be all right? And she'd say, I'm not the leader. I'm not the leader. And I was like, okay, well, what is this about? But I had, at a certain point, received a message from my guides. We were kind of at the end of the book, and what was coming in for me, that it was time for each individual to come to a greater understanding of their own gifts and their own leadership style, whatever that might be. And you know, that the message was, books are great, but you know, I think there were like 10 women in this group, unique, beautiful, talented, interesting women. And we were spending all this time reading information from other leaders. And so I brought up to the non-leader who was the leader, this idea of what would it be like if each Tuesday for 10 or 12 weeks, we took turns and someone came in and they just kind of led with whatever. One woman loved art and, you know, using spirituality, you know, the divine would come through her in this creative process. And it's like, great, let's learn more about that.
I love
you
that.
Know, and so, well, the feedback was, well, I don't know if everybody, first of all, I don't know if everybody's comfortable with that. And I was like, sounds like you might not be, but I didn't say that.
But also people aren't always comfortable, you know?
Right. And I said, and if they're not, okay, they don't sign up for a week. Like, this isn't a like, must do this. And so what I believe, leadership, if I am a leader, I am tuned into my gifts. I'm also tuned into my my weaknesses, maybe my wounding. I'm aware of how I am perceived and received. I'm also aware of what is motivating my actions, right? So a leader to me is someone who is self-led, right? Like and self-read. And when I say self-read, I've read, you know, I'm self-read. And that's a leader. And the presentation of that is going to be uniquely different and beautiful, right? Some leaders are, you know, going to lead through just quiet actions, right? Some leaders are loud, big voices, lots of energy. But hopefully the leadership that emerges in the aftermath of what was is something that presents itself a little bit differently than that which we've had before, which is the strongest, loudest, richest person is at the top.
Yes. I love how you said that. Like, a self-led is a self-read. I mean, that's where we're headed. That's absolutely where we're headed, because we're moving out of, and I'll borrow from Richard Rudd, moving from the hierarchy of here's the dominant culture, here's the person who had the people who have the most money, the most resources, the most support for making it. And instead of a vertical, we're moving into this horizontal heterarchy, where I think, interestingly enough, during lockdown, the world both contracted and expanded in different ways. Like, that was really the opening for me to virtual community. I otherwise would not have been super into virtual community. I'm not a techie person. I'm not drawn to that, but now I've got this beautiful virtual community that is a huge part of my life. So that expanded in that way, but it also contracted in that, like, people are a little bit more community minded now. People are a little bit more local focused, at least where I am in North Carolina, and others I've been talking to. It's this movement back away from big fill in the blank, whether that be big grocery, big pharma, big, whatever it is, to the smaller, where people feel like they do have a role to play, that they can bring their gifts and their strengths, and honoring each person as a leader in their own sphere, right? Instead of having one person. And this story of, like, I'm not a leader, I'm just wondering, for listeners or viewers, like, when we started talking about this, going back to last week's episode, observe your thoughts. Were the thoughts, did they come up like, I'm not a leader, I'm not a good leader, oh, I screwed that up, so I'm not going to be a leader anymore? Also, there's wounding around leadership, right?
Yeah, hello. That's just where my brain went.
Okay, so I mean, especially if you're of a marginalized population, then it's not even your own wounding with leadership, it's a collective wounding of being victimized by a dominant culture or leader.
Well, okay, so my life's work, if we're talking about Gene Keys, the shadow is deafness, and the gift is insight, and the city, or highest vibration of that, is an epiphany. And I feel like my role in communities is to come in and say the things that nobody wants to hear. Literally, they do not want to hear it. And that has oftentimes, I have felt a little bit in this role, and I am a natural leader. I just am. But I'm not a leader that everybody wants to follow. Like, I'm a leader that everybody actually, like, wants to, like, bang slings and arrows at me. It's like, I feel I can't be anything other than who I am anymore. I just can't. So I think I've mentioned that I struggled with anorexia for a long time, because it was like trying to be smaller than I was, like trying to, like, I'm only going to parcel out a little bit of who I am, because who I am is just too much. It's just too much. People can't handle it. And what I received in the fullest expression of who I was a target. I mean, my mom wanted me to be quiet, stop talking. I mean, it was just my whole life what was reflected back was, you're too much, stop, go away, we don't want you. And that has been really hard. And I have to say, even as an adult, I had this story of really being, I'm not going to join any big groups. Nope, no big groups for me. No, thank you. I know where that goes.
Yep.
And it's funny, I thought I had this ta-da moment, you know, when I was, I guess, in my 50s and invited into this group. And I was like, oh, it's finally I've done my work, and I've healed my wounds, and now I get to be in a healthy community. And I was like, oh, okay, here it is again. Here it is again. What I have to say, it's this drives me bananas, and this is the deafness. I will say something in a group, and you know when you're saying something that's pretty good, right? You're like, oh, that was pretty good. Wow, I don't know where that came from. And nobody really responds. And you're like, wait, did anybody hear me? And then 3 weeks later, someone else says what you just said, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And I'm like, huh? So it's funny that our wounds, right, and our gifts, that our gifts are always wanting to emerge, and our wounds are always calling out for healing. And it's this beautiful, like, opening and closing. And I think I've had this false idea that, well, and it's not false, but as I've grown, right, and healed, that what is reflected back to me, like, I won't see that anymore. I've cleared that, I've healed that. And because we are all connected, okay, yes, I've healed it to some degree in myself, but it's still calling out for healing in the collective, right? And who better than to help heal a wounding pattern in the collective than the one who's carried that wounding pattern?
That's so beautiful. That's such a beautiful way to look at that, because then it's not like, don't bring your shit to this group. It's like, please bring your shit to this group. And again, in a way that's like, it's done with consent, and like, hey, can I share this? It's not some sort of trauma dumping, because no one needs that.
Right.
But yeah, you can be as healed and as enlightened as you want on your own. That shit doesn't mean anything until you apply it in community.
Totally. And so I've got a lot of practice with this wound. So of course it's going to keep showing up in everybody, because I've got a lot of practice here.
And you activate that in other people so that they can look at it in themselves, right?
Totally. But I used to hold this belief that, like, it was going to be over.
Yeah.
Like, it's done now. Like, I won't see this anymore. And I'm like, well, I'm still seeing this. I'm still seeing this. Like, well, when we go back to the gene keys, right? I'm going to keep seeing. I'm going to see these shadows. I'm going to see these gifts. And hopefully, as a collective, right, as we start to heal and come together and vibrate higher, we're going to see more and more of these cities, right? This full flowering of humanity. But it has to happen in community, returning to self-led,
right?
Because we have to go out and explore and experience and practice with the perceived other, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times we get caught up in the blame game of like, this person is doing this to me, or this person brought this energy to the group, and it's like, that's only triggering if it's resonating something in us, right? And so it's that moment of pause again. Pause. Okay, why is their shit triggering me? What's going on for me? How can I love myself in this? And then, of course, love them in this. But here's my question, and going back to the, like, kind of my story that I shared, how do we navigate if there is truly a poisonous, toxic energy in the group, right?
Yeah. Okay. So what I was thinking in a group, right? There's always one. There's always one, right? Wait, there just is.
Yeah.
And thinking about that, of course,
And
there is.
sometimes it's me. I'm just going to
Totally.
say that. It could be someone different every time.
Absolutely. If I'm able to understand that this group, okay, is a reflection of what's going on in the world, of course, there's always going to be one. If you think there's going to be this container in this group and everything's flowing and jiving and nothing comes up, it's like, no, it will come up, because this is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So until we have ascended to our highest, angelic realm, there's going to be all this. It's going to be the person who maybe is a little tone deaf to like what we're trying to create here or whatever. But how do we deal with it? And without sounding trite and like, don't slap me through the whatever this is. We love it. We love it. Like everything is a call for love, right? Everything's a call for love. And so is there a way, for me to gently say to someone, wow, it seems like you're carrying a lot of pain, and you want to get together for coffee outside of the group? And maybe that person has no place to go with any of this. I don't know. But you and I have sat in many groups together where you're just like, oh, for the love of God, like, here we go again, But if I were able to say to that person, not in the group, not in a shaming, blaming way, like, you really seem fixated on this particular topic. Is this something, that we could explore together? Can I help you work this out? But in the past, I'm literally like, bitch is wasting my time. Oh my God, get over it. This isn't even a real problem. What's wrong with you? Or how can you be so selfish? All my own projections onto this person who clearly she's doing her role, right? She's in the group to activate whatever shadow, whatever wounds we still have. So again, without sounding too Pollyanna or trite, can I for a second, just a second, be thankful for this person who's reminding me, be gentle,
Right.
be patient. And that's what we're going to need to bring to what's going on out there. Can I be gentle? Can I be patient? Some days I'm better than others, and can I be curious? I don't have all the answers. So can I be curious instead of assuming? So I was driving down the street yesterday, speaking of cooperative energy, and I'm driving down Brentwood, which is a main thoroughfare. We got lots of big businesses, and I see REI, which I see REI, Whole Foods. Thank you. These are all little anyway. But REI now, very small. REI co-op. I'm like, huh. Most people aren't going to see that they've added that on. Okay.
They added it on the sign?
It's on the sign.
Okay.
And I'm like,
I'm like trying to picture the REI sign now.
And I'm like, what's going on? Then I see we got some credit unions popping up. And I'm like, all right, I guess if I'm reading the room right, people are going to start moving to credit unions. And this is not to create any kind of fear. I don't believe there's going to be a cataclysm and we're all going to have to, go find gold and, melt our silver. Like, been there, done that. We're not doing that. But I'm trying to sort of observe my environment and be curious about it, because my tinfoil hat brain wants to go, oh, REI, they're going to they're gonna try and control I think the movement, we're moving into a cooperative system. All right. So the systems that are already here, I'm going to be curious. Maybe they're like, well, this sounds fun. Like it'll be really great to bring in others. Maybe they're like, yeah, we don't want to lose our, we're on this
adapt or
footing.
die.
Right. So we're gonna, I'm just gonna try and be curious. What does a REI co-op look like? And the credit union also co-op.
Interesting.
Okay, all right. So the energy of cooperative corporations, and I think of the word corporation and incorporating cooperative energy. So just being curious about what we're observing in a group, in our community, within myself, right? And are my thoughts, my words, and my actions creating cohesion and unity, or are they dividing?
Right. I love that. That's a great question. And if they're dividing, I mean, that's literally ingrained in us. We've accepted Darwin's theory of evolution, a theory, as truth. And we're that's kind of the basis of all that we do, is like survival of the fittest, the strongest, the bravest. Those are the ones who win, right? Life is a game to win. If you win all the resources, you get the pot of gold, you go to the next level. And
divide and conquer.
Exactly. Divide and conquer. Exactly. And this new world and these kids, these kids who are growing up in this new world, they're not having it. It's I see us transitioning away from, and if we think about groups in an evolutionary sense, right? They were the way to survive, right? You find your group, but then you survive by making your predator the other. You find your group because they're going to offer you protection, and everyone else is the other. And now we're moving into our groups, not for protection, not for survival, but for thriving, for creation versus conflict.
Okay, so a message is coming in right now about connective fiber and the human and the species and the organic connective fiber. Ooh. that keeps us supple.
Oh, yes.
It keeps us supple and open. And then we've got connective fiber, literally fiber optics. Oh, and there's more about that. There's more about that. As related to the energy of dominion that has been at the forefront of our experience in the last several hundred years. The inorganic fiber, which is now technology, fiber optics, all of that is going to be emerging of this. There's something beautiful about technology and, crystals, right? So crystals basically drive computers. I mean, silica is a crystal. So that energy, but also the very beautiful organic connective tissue, which is the human, right? And I don't know why that came in while we were talking, but it's I guess I'm thinking of the fall of Atlantis right now, and all of that. They were technologically advanced society, right? But the connective fiber, which is the love, right? The connection, operating from the energy of inclusion, that was out of balance. And so all of that broke apart.
Yeah, I see it as like, instead of individual groups, we've got that connective tissue that creates the pathways for us to flow from this group to this group to this group. We're not contained, and we're
Right.
not excluding. There, again, the concept of there is no other, and there damn sure is no other to fear.
No, and we are working together. So to go back to your, organs and cells in the body, when you think about my liver and my kidney and my gallbladder, right, my heart, they all have different functions.
But all connected.
They're all connected. And something beautiful came to mind yesterday. My brother was talking about the organist. He went to some service yesterday. And I was reminded about some message I had gotten at one point about each organ in our body responds to a certain musical note, right? And certain musical notes bring that organ into harmony.
Ooh.
Thinking about that, as you have your, gallbladder, your kidneys, and your liver, creating harmonious energy in this group and this group and this group radiates out into the whole to create a fully flourishing
Organism.
human.
Yeah.
Organism. Yeah.
And I think of those, have you seen that they do like they take a star's frequency and they attribute a musical note to it, and then they show the whole expanse of the night sky and all the stars, and it's this just like beautiful orchestra of like, like every note that there is being sung over us in the heavens. And so then what we would believe within us too, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I haven't seen that.
I'll have to send it to you. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess a good place to start, if you're watching, what is the concept of community for you, right? What was your first experience? Probably your family, or like Claire, school. When the word community, are you like, oh, fun? Or are you just like, ugh, and just starting to be curious about how you feel. If you're wounded around community, excited about community, and then gifts,
right?
What gifts do you know your gifts? And if you don't know your gifts, maybe ask 3 people. Hey, get vulnerable for a second. What do you see as my gifts? And start there if you don't know what your gifts are, because we are all here on this earth with just an abundance of beautiful gifts to share, and it is our calling to understand what those are and offer them.
And we can play with it in different community settings. In my family, I may play this role. In my friend group, I may play this role. And it's all a dance, right? What is being called for? Which of my gifts is being called for in this moment? And it doesn't always have to look the same.
I love that, Claire. I love that. And I don't know why that made me think of this movement that we're going through. And I don't want to get political, and I don't want to bring in all that. But the idea of trying on different hats, we'll just call it different hats. And I believe that we've all had other lifetimes on this earth, in different body suits, right? And so maybe this time of awakening in my cellular being is remembering these different experiences and playing in that remembrance. So maybe in some, I'm a little bit of the comic in one group, and then in another group, I'm, more of an austere. That's a joke, because I probably couldn't. But you know, bringing those different energies, I think is a really good point, because we are not fixed individuals. We're always changing from day to day, moment to moment, right? Our cells are turning over. I don't know if we have new skin, like, do we shed everything once a year? I don't really know, but we are new. With each breath we take, we are new again. We are renewed. And so I like that idea of how am I wanting to express or experience myself through the eyes of the other today.
Within the community. Yeah. What a
So,
beautiful message just for spring too. We are renewed each moment.
we are renewed each moment. So I hope there is a sense of renewal happening for each and every one of you. And I hope that these conversations spark something in you.
And we'd love for you to be a part of our community.
Yes, please, please, and thank you. Please and thank you. Claire, thanks for bringing this topic up today. We kind of started this morning with like, well, Claire was like, I want to talk about community. And then we were like, what? Oh, can I read this before we close?
Oh yeah. It'll be a nice send off.
It'll be a nice send off. So the I-Ching, we'll get into this later. It's a beautiful ancient oracle. Do we say it? Ancient Chinese oracle?
Yeah, and it's based on like numerology and astrology and
yeah, and it brings together everything in my mind. But we were like, well, wait, are we talking about synergy or synergy? And whatever, I did the I-Ching this morning as just a little grounding tool. And what I rolled, and we can break this down if anyone's interested, but I won't get into it, was the joyous lake. True joy is experienced by those who are strong within and gentle without. And I'm going to try and make it, condense it. Okay. We often see around us how forcible effort brings about what appears to be progress. So we think of that in the business world and community. Our egos tempt us to believe that these gains are lasting and valuable, but the truth is otherwise. Whatever is won by the desirous, ambitious, demanding manipulations of the ego will soon be lost. Others can always be temporarily browbeaten into doing things our way, but only hearts won by friendliness and sincere goodwill are true over time. The I-Ching teaches us again and again and again that joy and success cannot be forced nor stolen. They are achieved gradually but steadily by those who relate correctly to others and to the higher power. To relate correctly means to steadfastly practice innocence, detachment, acceptance, modesty, and gentleness. Life is full of shortcuts, but this is the only route that leads to true and lasting joy. The image of the hexagram is that of two lakes joined together to keep from drying up. It is an encouragement to us to join with like-minded friends now in the discussion and contemplation of higher things. If we engage in an ongoing conversation about proper principles with our friends, our relationship to truth is steady, and our ego cannot seduce us into doubt, fear, and anxiety that lead away from joy. In your heart, be firm in holding to what is good and honest and correct. In your thoughts and actions, be gentle and accepting. Those who persevere on this path will be met with true joy and lasting success.
Nothing left to say.
Pretty nice, huh?
Perfect.
I love you. I love you. I love you. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you soon.